Well, our third stop today is at the home of Dr. Ray Campbell here in Stillwater. And longtime viewers may recall that Ray was host of Oklahoma Gardening from 1979 to 1985. And Ray, thank you for showing us around today.
Oh, it's my pleasure, Brenda. It's a real pleasure to have you all out here today.
Well, we're glad to be here. And Ray, some of our viewers might want to know what you've been doing since you left the show.
Well, I've been doing a lot, Brenda. I think, as you're aware, and some people are, that when I left the show in December of '85, actually I went to Extension Administration, and I was program leader for Extension Agriculture programs for several years, and then became Associate Director for Extension, and had the opportunity to take an early retirement program on December 30th of last year. And so for the last 6 months or so, I've been as I say, self-unemployed and really enjoying it.
Well, good. Now, you've been working on your garden here and basically dealing with gardening in a smaller space.
Right. Well, some people think it's pretty big, but it's really small compared to the garden I used to have, particularly when I was doing Oklahoma gardening. And I've also got some other challenges here. This soil is really thin and real poor. It has a lot of sandstone underneath it. I've got a lot of shade trees, but there's some specific things I want. So I've kind of had to overcome some obstacles, and I've had pretty good success, I think.
That's good. Now, some of what you've been doing, you've built some very nice raised beds here.
Right, that's what I started out with. At the time we moved here, which is a little more than 5 years ago, I didn't have much time to work in my garden, but I wanted some. So we built 3 raised beds, and that was really all I had. And then in between the raised beds, I had just wood chips for a path. But I decided more recently that I wanted a little bit more than that. And so my paths were large enough so I could come in between the raised beds and actually turn that into a couple of rows where I could put some things that took more room and will do better in the ground than in the raised beds, such as my tomatoes and then a little bit of corn with some beans growing on it.
Oh, well, that's a very good use of space here. And you've also got some permanent plantings now in some of your raised beds.
Right. I guess one of the things in gardening, particularly with a small space like this, is you pretty well have to decide what do you really want. And my wife and I had blueberries at our other house, and we really loved them, so we decided we want some blueberries. I don't care if it takes up a permanent space, we want some blueberries. And so in one of my raised beds 2 years ago, this is the second year of growth, I converted that in and amended my soil and put some blueberries in here. So I really have taken that space out for all practical purposes as far as anything except for the blueberries. Although I would say that this year I fudged a little bit and I planted a nice row of Vidalia onions along the side of those blueberries, and they did very, very well. Oh, but my blueberries are doing very well. I'm real proud of those, and probably this is the second year growth on them, and I think I'll probably pick some next year.
Okay. Well, you talked about amending the soils for your blueberries. What exactly did you do to those?
Well, the soil is about an equal mix of good topsoil and compost. And then I also added some peat moss to the soil to acidify it, and then a little bit of sulfur to bring the pH down to about 5.2. And then I set my blueberries in there. I've got a soaker hose on these because, of course, the blueberries require a lot of water, and the roots are so shallow that we need to keep them pretty well soaked. And so I put a little bit of sulfur in there, as I said, have the pH about 5.2, and then I fertilize with a water-soluble acid fertilizer. And so it's worked out real well for me.
Oh, good. Now, you've also got some other gardening projects going on here.
You know, yeah, I'm basically a cheap gardener. And so here at the end of the year, when there's a lot of what I call bargain basement or garage sale shopping you can do at the garden centers, I've picked up some plants pretty cheap and have made, I think, some really nice containers out of some end-of-the-season plants that the viewers may want to see. So let's go over and look at those.
Okay. Now, this is what you call your bargain center here?
Right, this is my bargain center, Brenda. At the end of the season, I think if you really look carefully at some plants, you can really get some pretty good buys, pretty good deals, but you really have to know what to look for. And obviously, it's like anything else. You want to kind of search through and find a good product for what you're going to pay. But what I have done here is I've looked at some of the garden centers around where they're having some of the end of the year closeout sales or where some of their plants are getting low, and really picked out some nice plants. And I've made a lot of planters. My suggestion would be, if people want to get a good buy on plants this year and get some that are this time of the year and get some that are rather inexpensive, particularly the annual plants, you probably wouldn't want to put those out in your garden area or in your flower beds because it is so hot now and so dry that you'd be continually having to water those. But you can really make some nice containers. And as you can see, I've got several containers that I've started around the deck here. These containers here have only been planted about 4 days.
Oh, wow.
And I've got a Dracaena in there and a couple of geraniums, a couple of asparagus fern, a blue days, and then a yellow lantana just for color. And I figured up, and this planter here cost me less than $10
That's a
to
very
fill.
good deal.
And so it's pretty good. But being cheap also, I like to mix my own soil, particularly if I'm making a lot of containers. And so I usually start my soil with a good commercial potting soil mix, maybe like Peters or Bacco or something. But if you fill a lot of containers, that's going to take a lot of soil. So I take that as a base and then add about to 1 part of potting soil, about 1 part good topsoil, 1 part compost, and a part sand. And so I can really expand that potting soil that way and fill these containers.
So that's a very good way to stretch that out.
Right. Another thing I've got a $1 pot of petunias, and that's what they look like. But I can cut those petunias back, fertilize them with some water-soluble fertilizer. In about 3 weeks, I really have a nice hanging basket of petunias that, again, was very inexpensive. So I would encourage people to try some bargain basement gardening this time of the year.
Well, that's a very good idea. And we really appreciate you showing us around your yard here today.
Well, it's been my pleasure, Brenda. You all come back anytime.
Okay, we will.